Okay, Joe, we are rolling.
Today's
Wait a second, something's wrong. Oh, no, it's fine, okay. We're okay.
okay. Today's Wednesday, May 26, 2011. My name is Joe Lanier of the Southern Oral History Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I am in Austin, Texas, with our videographer for the project, Mr. John Bishop. And we are here to interview Mr. James Oscar Jones for the joint project being conducted by the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian, and more particularly the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, the new Civil Rights History Project, a national Civil Rights Oral History series. Mr. Jones, it's good to be with you. Thanks so much for sitting down.
Thank you.
As I mentioned before we turned on the camera today, I thought we'd start with just to sketch your family history, because I know it will have a lot to do with the course of your life, and so I'd love to hear about where you were born, where you came up, parents.
Mm-hmm. Glad to. My parents, Ernest Jones, and Mom, Curtis Jones. Dad, my father, born and raised on the farm. That was his life. That's what he loved to do. I'm a member of a family of 10 children, 6 boys and 4 girls. And the first 5 children was born as Rowden, because their dad was Rowden, and he was killed cutting logs in the wood. And so that first 5 were very young when he died. And then my dad, Ernest Jones, married my mama and has 5 more children. But my dad raised all 10 of us, because they was very, very young when their dad got killed. And basically what he did was, they were very disciplined, had a 7th grade education. Mom had a 7th grade education, but very bright, very brilliant people. And one of the ambitions they had, and they gave us as we were little kids, he had 2 goals for us. He wanted all of us to be educated, and he wanted to see all 10 of us in heaven. And so he wanted us to be committed to church, hard work, and school. So I had the pleasure of going to school all the way through elementary, all the way through high school, and I never missed a day. He was mean and tough on us going to school. So we had to get up 4 o'clock in the morning, milk the cows, feed the pigs, and do all of this, walk 1 mile from the house to the dirt road where the bus came by, and catch the bus at 6:45. And you had to do that. That was your chore, and it applied to everybody, the girls and boys the same way. So we had the fortune of understanding work very early and going to school very early. And that's kind of what Dad shaped. He said when he bought his first acre of land, he was 13 years old. He paid $1.25. It took him 6 months to make that $1.25. So the farm we grew up on were part of Frank McKinnon, which is Jeanette McKinnon, which is my mama's side. But then he added to the acreage and grew us a good farm where we farmed cotton, corn, and then we had, because he couldn't borrow any money from Farmers Home Administration those days, he created a large piece of the farm, and we had peach orchards and berries and all of that. And the cash money we made from the sale of the fruit and vegetable is what money he used to farm the cotton, corn, and with. So.
How big was, and what was the nature of Willisville in those days?
Well, when I was a little boy, there was a lot of folks there. It never has been an incorporated town. It's just a village. I would say when I grew up, 200 or 300 kids maybe. And what happened is most of the kids grew up with me, migrated and took off, went to Detroit, Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, all those places looking for work. We were the only black farm group in Willisville with a farm.
Did you?
All the other kids worked on farms, but they were not theirs. Primarily white farmers, and that was hard because they weren't allowed to go to school. They came to school maybe after Thanksgiving, but by March it was time to start tilling the soil again. They had to come back to work. So a lot of them didn't have the opportunity I had to go to school from grade 1 through high school. Yeah.
How'd your father manage the farm without all that extra help that would have been there if he hadn't sent you every day to school?
Well, what he did was, all of us was big enough to do some from our older sisters and brothers, but also he always used, and there were some of the older kids who dropped out of school and just kind of wondered, and he would go get those kids and bring them back, and they would work there with us. And he would pay them at the end of the day or at the end of the week. They were excited about that because when they worked on the other farms that they didn't own, a lot of time they were put on the books. And the problem with that system was they never made enough money. They never worked hard enough to pay off those debts. So you were always, and then Dad would have them to come over in September when the state fair was taking place. And he would say, come on over here late in the evening and I'll give you a little work so you have a few bucks to go to the fair. And everybody wanted to go to the fair, but they didn't have any money, so that's how Dad helped out. And then they was gracious to come over and work at our place as well.
Were your parents, tell me about church, and were they active in the NAACP?
My mama was very active. Dad stayed very close to the farm, day in, day out. But Sunday was a day you couldn't touch the farm. I mean, that was a day you had no choice but to get up and down the dirt road and fighting the dust going to church. All day long church. not one service like the city folk out at 8 o'clock or 12 o'clock. No, you went to church in the morning, and when you got out of that church, you went to another church because my mom had a beautiful singing voice. And everybody in the little neighborhoods wanted her to come sing. We'd hop in the back of the truck and go to that. And then somebody had a 5 o'clock meeting, we'd go to that church. So it was church, 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 church. So, oh yeah, I had plenty of church.
Tell me about their sense of politics and race relations. And
my mama, everybody called my mother Vic. Matter of fact, when she passed away, and they had the name Curtis Jones, and a lot of folks called the funeral home in Magnolia, said, who is this Curtis Jones? So the undertaker said, well, everybody know her as Vic. And when he said that, people from all over the country had left and went to Milwaukee and said, y'all cannot have that funeral. Postpone that funeral because we want to come home to that funeral. And that's when the word got out it was Vic. So hundreds and hundreds of people came in. But Mama she was very active in organizations. NAACP in Magnolia, that was the closest place. She would go to those meetings, and when she would come back, she would talk to kids at church. Now, we got to do some things. They talked about in that meeting how we can do better, how folk need to learn how to fix up their own homes and all that, and stop depending on outside people. And then she would, when they would have those meetings, she and her sister would throw people in the back of the old pickup truck and they was gone. And it was not a thing where she would go ask parents permission. She would just get in that old truck and just go through and get in this truck, and they would go to the meetings. So the kids, growing up in a rural area, they were glad to jump in the back of the truck and go somewhere, So that was her. She was just very active all over the place, and And when she learned about what people were doing, she would come back to church and talk to church people about what we need to do is we need to get the men together to do this and women get together, because that's the kind of thing she would learn from the NAACP meeting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you remember, say, let's think of a few things through the 50s, and from Brown v. Board to
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery to Little Rock,
Mm-hmm.
especially Little Rock, given where you were. Were those things talked a lot about in the house, at church?
The
Ripple through your life is what I mean.
The one thing I remember was in the Brown case. Thurgood Marshall and my dad he had this big old radio, huge radio, and it was very powerful. Matter of fact, in Willisville, Arkansas, we could pick up St. Louis, and that's how we kept up with baseball. Always had the radio on. And Mr. Thurgood made a statement, and it was on the radio. He wanted every Negro in America to stand still that one day at noon, because
We got a little problem here.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we're back.
Ms. Jones, we had just had a brief pause to check the camera. You had just started talking about Brown, and you were saying an important thing about your dad and in relation to Thurgood Marshall.
They were so amazed by that, and Mr. Thurgood put out on radio that on that day, 12 noon, is all Negroes should stand still at 12 noon, because of the Supreme Court is fixing to make an announcement. And that announcement and that Supreme Court are going to change this whole nation. So Daddy, said, and he went to the little school, Sweet Home, where I was going to school. He went down there and told the teachers about it and said that we need to make sure everybody hear what is about to be said. So he had that much politics in his head. And people got those radios and really was listening for that announcement. So he stayed on top of stuff. The same way, he was that same way about farming. He could not borrow money from Farmers Home Administration, but what he would do is that he kept his eyes very close on what white farmers were doing, and some of the wealthier white farmers would use the plows, and they would break a plow, and they had the ability to go and to get money and get a new one. And what he did was he would ask those black guys that were working for those white owners, he said, what are they going to do with that plow? Oh, nothing. We've already gone and got it. He said, I want to see if I can get that plow. So they were going to say, Mr. Womack, Ernest want that plow. You can have it, it's broke. And he would take it up to, because the little school we went to, a vocational school, and the kids would experiment with welding that back. And so we would use those plows. So that was, those were accumulation that he didn't have to pay for as part of his farming. So he was on top of the farming as well as the political side of the thing. Yeah.
The fact that your father owned his own farm, how much did that matter in two ways? One, in relation to other members of the black community locally,
Mm-hmm.
and in relation to maybe how your life unfolded in a sense of how you measured your own possibilities and independence.
Mm-hmm. The first part on the farm side, what Mom and Dad did, people who lived on other farms and they had very poor houses, he knew that if we did any kind of work on those houses, they would get tossed off the farm. And what he would do, he would have us to go and help them, the crack of the house and all that kind of stuff. We would go cut wood and put it on the inside to seal the holes and everything, and that was no cost. And that was something his son, we had to do it. And I remember the one time my brother under me, he took a quarter from this little lady and says, y'all do so much and we're just so thankful. Here, y'all take this quarter. I told Chester, I don't take no money. Dad, I don't want no, this is something he wants us to do for folks. And we went home and Dad would say, did you boys taking the money? I said, no, sir. I said, Chester did. He said, well, how much money I don't remember her name. He said, gave him a quarter, give me that quarter. And so he took the quarter and we went to church Sunday. He made Chester take that quarter up to the pulpit and put it in offering. He could not spend it. So, and we did that for a lot of elderly people. And so he was just that kind of caring. On the other side, I was being kind of trained to do something pretty good, but I didn't see it because Dad and Mama would go to the school and would have all these talks with the teachers. And what they was talking about later on, I learned from my older sisters and brothers, is that they said, James, Dad and Mom is very proud of you. You're real smart. And they'll tell those teachers to push you real hard because you got the smarts. But I learned that a little later because I noticed I always have to do everything at school, everything. We have a little school program. No, we want you to be the MC. We want you to start that group. We want you to be over the agriculture program. And I had all these assignments. And so when I would come home, I didn't get a chance to go out and play because I had to do all these things, and they would come. Now, James, you got to get all that stuff done. So between feeding the hogs and the chicken and all that, and doing that, by that time it's dark. And I also played basketball on the basketball team, but I didn't see anything in that. But when I got a little further in school, toward the 11th grade, I could see it. We want you to do some marvelous things, James, and you got the skill, you're smart, you do good work in school, you go in places. That's when they started encouraging me. And then when that happened, I was playing basketball, and this was a real shock to me because, we worked hard, but Dad didn't give you no money. And we would always ask Daddy, why do you, other kids come work on the farm, why do you pay them but you don't pay us? He said, that's because I'm saving for hard time. So my sister Clara said, well, Dad, it's pretty hard. He said, no, you don't even know what hard time is. You got a place to stay, you got clothes, so you're teaching us that you don't know what a hard time is. And then the guys way across what we call a creek, the bus didn't go over there, so they were basketball guys. They would come over to our house and stay with us, and the bus would come down this dirt road. And we were playing in this district tournament, and Daddy came up to us, and he had like $25 in change and $1 bill. He said, James, take this, and you boys got a little money to spend. And he said, and the girls buy them ice cream like a nickel, and buy the girls some ice cream, and oh man, we was on cloud nine. So when we got to the gym, I bought the girls the ice cream, and so the word was around, he's rich. That's what because I had a few dollars, because the kids would have that all day. Oh, he's rich. So a lot of the kids started calling me rich. I said, if I am, I don't know nothing about it. I don't see. You saw the same money I saw at that one ball game. So, so he helped us, and he pushed me and all of us to do well. older sisters and brother at that point had gone on to Milwaukee, and now they went to school as they left, but that was after they left, and but in my case, I stayed there, and my older sisters and brother would write letters and say how you doing in school and send me your grades, and I would send them my grade. They would send me $1, and when back in those days, $1, man, you was filthy rich.
Yeah. I'm interested. We'll talk about everything that's going to happen in Pine Bluff after you get there in '61 and especially in '63.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious if how much the early '60s were, late '50s, early '60s, was making an impact on you. Little Rock in '57, sit-ins in Greensboro in '60, all of what happened quickly after that. Yeah.
The one big favor, well, not favor, but the one thing that prepared me really well for that is that because Daddy and Mama listened to the radio and they paid attention to that kind of stuff, and they were really on top of Central High. And I remember one time Mama said to me, she said, "Son, if you ever been put in that situation, don't turn it down. You go forward with it." And that was a result of what I didn't realize was that my mama and my aunt and daddy, in the early days, they had buses come through a small town. And even in those days, they were the only black folks that would get on that bus on the front seat and take us with her. And then that kind of came back to me. I said, "Oh, we integrating the bus line." Because when Central High came through, it kind of, and those were her words, that whenever you get an opportunity to do something for other people, don't be afraid. Because you didn't come from an afraid. She said it was dangerous when y'all went to wear your own cotton. The white people didn't like that, but y'all been through it and you've seen it, and you can, when opportunity come, don't go to the back of the line. You go to the head of the line and be brave about it. Now they did talk about that, and when I went off to school, I had all that in my head. So it wasn't, I wasn't looking for anything, but when I saw, when I got to Pine Bluff in the cities, you saw real segregation because it was a city. In Willisville, you were down to Woo in the Woods, and when you go to town, you would see it. But when I got there, I really saw it. But I wasn't organized or nothing, but I saw it as I went downtown, and I saw the Holiday Inns and all of those, and I looked at it and I saw, only thing I saw black folks was they were maids. So that registered in my mind. Yeah. And when I went back home, I shared that with them.
Yeah.
She said, "Well, son, I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's what my mama said to me. If you go somewhere and y'all, like, because we would travel sometime with the football, the sports, don't you never go through a back door. If whites go through the front door, you go through the front door." Now, I heard that from her.
Yeah. You mentioned a moment ago that your family, you mentioned that, you had gone and weighed your own cotton. Can you tell that story just a little bit about that, Matt? Yeah.
Well, kids who lived on a plantation, they would work hard, and you have these 10 and 12 foot long sacks. And when you picked that much cotton, you were hitting 60 pounds, 65, and some guy was really good and hit as much as 80. But when they brought their bags to the gin, white people didn't let them stay there to weigh their own cotton. So they would bring the bags and drop them. They go back. Now, in my case, Daddy and Mama, Aunt Nun and Uncle Bloofer went to the gin. Now, my mama, dad, and uncle and auntie were gun packing black folks. They would sit right at the gin with them double barrel shotgun and 2 shell between their fingers. And when we got our cotton, come on, boys. And they would go up there and we would weigh our own cotton. Now, the kids who would bring their cotton to the gin, they couldn't weigh theirs. And we would sit there and watch this. Sometimes those bags would be 70 pounds of cotton. And these guys would ask each other, well, John, what you think? Oh, let me see. Oh, give or take 41 pounds. Oh, pretty good, old boy. You give him benefit of 47 pounds. So that's 40 pounds they were taken away from him. So I would sit there and witness that. Now the fun kind of thing was, man, Clary and Jesse and all of us, we felt pretty comfortable because Mom and Aunt Nun was there with those guns. And so when we weighed our cotton, we would look at the white folks.
How could your family get away with that?
It was, everybody in Woolworthville and the surrounding area believed that if they bothered my family, there was a whole lot of killing that take place. Well, they believed that. Because my brother had been in a real bad racial situation. Troy, I got his number on that. He was the only black member that went to a little town called McNeil, and he got a job working on the railroad. He wasn't on the train. He was doing the hard work, putting those spikes and all that to keep the rail. And when he went wherever they went, and on the way back, when they got to McNeil, they told Troy he had to get off the train because blacks couldn't, Negro wasn't the black folks' name, it was Negroes in those days. Negroes couldn't ride the train through McNeil's little small town. And my brother Troy wouldn't get off the train. And just like my parents, he had his weapon. And it was a hard knockdown fight. He stabbed and cut a whole bunch of white folks, and then they chased him and shot him up pretty bad. But he got through the woods and all that, and so the white people decided that they were going to come to our house and kill him. And Mr. Chester Waters is the guy who in Willisville had the little store, both little stores there. He told the people, said, don't y'all go over there. Y'all going to get killed. And so my dad had some brothers, some cousins, and you had to go down through these woods, this dirt road, to get over to the farm. And about dark at night, they was coming in there to get Troy. Man, there was so much shooting and so many people got hit, and I heard them screaming, "Oh, I've been hit!" And what Daddy did, and his brothers, when they were shooting people, they went to them and took their guns. They let them go, but they took all their guns. And so it was kind of known that the McKinneys want the folks to mess with. And there was a lot of them. It was a bunch of them.
How old were you?
I was 68.
No, sorry, excuse me. How old were you then?
Oh, 8, 9. Matter of fact.
So early 50s then.
Yeah, I went up to Willisville, and because Dad had made the comment, said if they come down here and mess with me, I'm gonna kick their ass. Those exact words. So I thought he was talking to me, and I went Willisville like a mile and a half. So I walked all the way to Willisville and told this white guy, "Whoa, back." What my dad had said, he kicked me. I went back home and told Dad he kicked me. Dad said, I'll take care of that later because all this was in the making. preparing for this. Yeah. Mm.
He calls for us, yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Ooh, oh yeah.
Okay.
Tell me what it was like to impressions you formed when you arrived in Pine Bluff to go to school. And I'm thinking about you mentioned already that you saw segregation in the landscape of that city in a way you hadn't seen it before, but also on the campus, because that was a very important black institution.
When I got there to Pine Bluff, that was my first big city. The campus was very pretty. It was real exciting. And what helped me jumpstart real fast is that the school I went to, Oak Grove High School, was a very good school. And matter of fact, they had sent about 4 guys from that school with professors at Pine Bluff. And I didn't know that was before I came along. And my brother in Milwaukee sent me a letter and said, there is a guy in the vocational school. You go find him and tell him that Charlie, one of my older brothers, sent you. He was a Haney, Dr. Haney. And I went there, and when I walked into his office, he looked up and he said, I don't know your name, but you sure one of them Joneses from Ralston, Willisville. And he recognized, oh yeah, you look just like Ernest Jones. And so I started talking, and then he really was telling me all about the school, and walked around and took me all over the campus and said, this is one of my boys, Ernest Jones boys. Them boys are sweet, kind. I mean, he really just painted this beautiful picture. They are smart. And I want all of you professors, keep your eyes on him. He's a good student. Don't be putting him over in social studies. He's good math, algebra. He came from a high school that had all of that. And because when some guys asked me, he said, one guy told me, said, you might need to take preliminary courses. He said, you from a small town? I said, yeah. He said, what did you have in high school? I said, I had algebra, I had trigonometry, I had physics, I had biology, chemistry. He said, man, what kind of school did you go to? I said, I had a school that was very good school. As a matter of fact, the principal imported, he handpicked teachers from all around to come there and at that school.
Was Oak Grove private?
No, it was a school, but it was, there were 4 schools in Arkansas. And that was built way back in the 1931 by the, I think they were it's a group out of New York somewhere built these schools way back, because I know our school was opened in 1829, and the school was built, and they had vision of folks coming, because the school was built with dormitories. So these teachers came from other places, and they lived right there on campus. I think the Quakers,
Exactly.
and there was 2 all-black school districts. Mine was one of them, and the other one was Arkansas City, where Ebony Magazine Johnson man came out of. So we had, unlike a lot of other schools, we had books, because we could float bonds, and we had to, the books, not because a lot of the white school give their old books to the black schools, but no, we had good books, and we had good teachers and things like that. So I had a good start.
You're describing a personal history that isn't very typical for folks in that time.
Yeah. It was.
Between. I'm sorry.
So when I got to Pine Bluff, I was very comfortable, and had met somebody that had been in Ralston, and then he took me around, and then he introduced me to Dr. Marshall. And Dr. Marshall was a professor on campus, and he had another little house right by his house. And he asked me, he said, well, you gonna live in a dormitory? I said, well, I gotta live somewhere. And Dr. Haney said, put them in your house over there, and you will take a liking to this young man. And so we started talking, and he said, you sure know a lot to be a country boy. He said, these country kids come up, they don't know nothing. We think the city kids know everything. And so we just started talking, and then he was the one told me, he said, there are some folks in Little Rock that's trying to get a civil rights thing started. And they went to Philander Smith, and they didn't have no luck there, because all those kids were city kids, and their parents said no, and they was gonna get put out of school and all of that. And he said, I'd like for you to meet those guys. And that's when Greenwich, that's how I met Greenwich. And when old Greenwich came down, and Greenwich and Bill Hanson, and I hadn't met Worth, but a little bit later on I met him. And so a few days later, they both came and started talking, and so Bill Hanson said, "Dang, man, you've already done what we tried to do down at your hometown." And then when I said, "Well, you know, that's how I was raised," he said, "Man, this would be a piece of cake for you." But then that wasn't when they were trying to get it started. But they said that they was working in Little Rock and doing some things. But when we come back to Pine Bluff, we need to sit down and talk, because this is a college town, and there's a lot of segregation here, and here you guys are down here. Y'all got all these McDonald's and all of this, and the black people can't go to it, and this city is driven by the university here, you know. So that.
What college town is closer to you?
That's how I met them. Yeah.
Do you remember more specifically about this group of folks, Greenwich and Hanson, and one's black, one's white? They're SNCC people.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably the first you might have heard of SNCC, maybe?
When we met, Greenwich talked about he had been involved in labor and union groups a lot. When Bill Hanson talked, he talked about he had been involved in sit-ins and things like that. But the first thing Bill Hanson said is, we need to organize some students to challenge. They had already been around and saw the McDonald's. I didn't even know what a McDonald's and all that was, even though it's right down the street. But Bill Hanson's take was, I'm a white boy and I don't need to be leading it. And that's what he said. But we need a black person, and you've already done all this stuff. And he said, if you went into one of these white restaurants and was arrested, what would your parents say? They would come up here, and they would come to the jailhouse, and they would say, James, is this what you want to do? And if I said yes, he said, we'll do whatever you need for us to support you, and they would go back home. He said, really? They wouldn't? I said, no. Because they talked to me long before I knew anything about this kind of stuff, about, you know, if you get involved and stuff, and they talked about, don't you ever go through no white doors, no back doors. You go through the front. There's a front door, and white people go, you go through it too. He said, whoa, man, well, your mama's a civil rights worker? I said, well, I guess not, because I in Willisville, there wasn't a whole lot to do, but I did tell them, I shared with them how Mom and them rode the bus, and he said, yeah, that's civil rights stuff. I said, I didn't know it about that, just, to me, that's how they were. And I remember Brian Womack was what we considered the rich white man there in Willisville. And as we got involved, as I got involved, he was talking to Mom about, you need to go get that boy, and he up there doing all of this, and in the black school, and that's where he need to be, and not running around, blah, blah, blah. And so Mama got the word, and I wasn't home when this happened. They said Mama went and jumped in the car with him, made him take her out to Waldo to buy some clothes for me, and told him, said, I really ought to make you take these clothes to Pine Bluff. My sister said, and Mr. Womack was a big white guy. He said it was freezing cold. He was sweating. He was sweating so bad because he knew Mom had that pistol in her purse. But but no, that, and I told him, no, my mama wouldn't do that. And he said because in Little Rock, that was the issue. Everybody was afraid that parent would take them out of school and do all this to them. That's why they couldn't get that started. So.
Did you, early on, do you have any instinct that that what might actually end up being the problem, did end up being one problem, would emerge, namely that the folks at the college that your president would?
No, I didn't think that side at all. I went and looked at the hotel that was segregated, and I went down there by myself the first time, just walking. Yeah, just to check it out. And when I came back, when they started talking about we need to protest these places, I said, let me go talk to some. I'll go talk to some students. And when I talked to them, I told them what my parents like. But I also said, now, if your parents is going to come up here and jump on you for doing it, don't go. Don't go. And then Mr. Doctor, her husband was a principal at a high school. And he told me, said, I went and met with him. He said, now I got some young high school student in my school, Townsend High School. The big high school there for most of the black were Merrill High, but this school was kind of getting started. He said, these kids, what you talking about doing, they need to get involved with a guy like you. He said, they're smart, but they want to be thugs. He said, oh, they real brave, and they want to be thugs. He said, but I think if they were around you, you would change them. I said, you think so? And so I met with them and talked to them about, my parents, what that was like. And they liked that. I said, now look, but now what we're talking about is going here, and it may be very violent, but we're going to be a non-violent group. So all the boys said, oh, hell no. No. There's going to be some fight. And, oh, no. I mean, they hit you in the face, knock you down, you're just going to fall and get up. I said, yeah. He said, oh, no. But, so.
Why do you think that was a good idea, the nonviolent? Okay.
Well, the way I looked at it was, if you can be nonviolent, the white people would be very happy to beat you down. They would be very happy doing that to you. But I felt, though, that in spite of that, you could overcome it over a time period. And I felt that if I was beaten down and the other kids was scared and afraid of it, I think eventually they'll come around. Like them kids I was talking about, they did. But and I think what helped me is I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I my knowledge wasn't good enough to feel that I definitely could win doing it right then. But I felt that I could see in white people's faces that it was working, because I saw young white girls and young white boys come up and would hit me and stuff and run, and when I would look at them, I saw them crying. But they didn't want folk to see them, but I saw them. I said, they doing something they don't want to be doing. So and I saw that, and when I told Glennis that, she said, "For real?" I said, "Yeah." They were told to come up and hit us, but that wasn't in their heart. And I saw it. I saw, yeah, we can do this.
The end of the first day, February 1, 1963, in Woolworths, how'd you feel at the end of that day?
That was a little scary because we sent, the first day we went to Woolworth, we tried to go there. It was locked or something. We couldn't get in. It was closed, renovation or something. And then, what's her name? Diane. Diane was in town. Diane. What's Diane's last name? I understand she's still going strong. Diane. Anyway, she was an extremely light-skinned black girl, and she went down to Woolworth and went in and eat because they thought she was white. And when she came back, she said, "No, it's open." And when we went in, she said, "Go in at 11 o'clock just for some reason." I think that was the time. I guess a lot of people going to be in there. So we pound in there, and it was a massacre because Diane had been through the Freedom Rides and all that stuff. And her theory, her strategy was that if there's a lot of people in there, it wouldn't hurt very well because it wouldn't be enough room. And then she said, if they start hitting you, fall to the floor. And when you fall to the floor to do all this, fall toward where the people were. So when we did that, all the white folks that was in there was also on the floor. So you down off of that, they tried to get up, you scoot a little bit further, they fall. So it's kind of fun and a little bit scary, But that's how it went. But
Chancellor Davis, before too many days.
That's
to meet with you.
Yeah, yep. That went. Well, two things, because we had a pretty good crowd, but that was short-lived because Dr. Davis called us in, and then half of the parents came to Pine Bluff too, and they were snatching all them kids off. I think when they finished with Dr. Davis and the parents, 3 or 4 of us maybe was left. It was. I know I was there. Nash. I think, let me see. Joanne stayed. The girl Joanne. Joanne now is, matter of fact, Joanne is a professor at Pine Bluff at college, and I think she just retired. She stayed. It's about who else? There was this tall guy from Texarkana. He stayed on. It's about 4 of us. It was. And then we all went to see the president, and he was pretty point blank. And he told us the very next day, if anybody went downtown, was suspended. Now, the interesting thing about that that was kind of different. It was only about 4 or 5 of us who said was going. But when we went the next time, there were about 12 or 15 folks in the suspension. But they didn't come the first time. So it kind of grew a little bit there. And he put us all out.
How'd you make your decision to take that hit, take the expulsion?
Well,
I mean, you've said a lot already that creates a context for that, but that must have been not an easy thing.
no, but in my case, folks, everybody asked me, "What do your parents think?" I said, "My parents support what I'm doing," and the tall guy from Texarkana, he called his parents and talked to them, and they kind of let him alone. The guy this other guy, Nash, he was from Pine Bluff. He stayed there, and I was kind of like the voice of encouragement. You know, they would sit there and listen to me, and what if we get hurt? I said, we are going to get hurt, but we are like this is like a war, and Woolworth, they attacked us, but there was no jail stuff there. And I said, eventually, we're going to have to go to jail if we continue to do this. So they were a little bit afraid of the jail. And then we went back there 2 or 3 times, shut out. The most violent, I thought the most violent was when we went to McDonald's. I thought that was I think that crowd really meant to hurt us. And I think what helped us was the owner locked the door, locked us in, and turned that gas on. And that gas was awesome. But I think if we had not been locked in, the audience I saw on the outside, they really had weapons and bat, and I think they would have hurt us real bad.
Can you describe that moment a little bit more when he turned? I don't understand when he turned the gas on.
When we were in there, the kids that was working in there, they left and went out, and we were still at the counter waiting to be served, and they locked the doors. Now, the gas was not the natural gas. It was, what kind of gas was that? That foggy. They turn that fog gas, and it burns you, and it gets in your eyes and shut your breathing off. What is that gas called?
Like tear gas?
Yeah. It's kind of cake gas. Now, what helped me with that was my brother Troy was in Houston. He had talked around at home about that gas because police would shoot it sometime, and he said if the way you handle that is that water helps you dilute. Make sure get some water, and if you're in a building, a commode, put your head in the water and water the towel, and he told me that. And so when they shot that gas, I went to the sink, turned the sink, the water was still on. And I said, everybody get in the water. And we all went in the water. And wherever, I guess somehow was close by because the water got cut off, but we was surviving pretty good. But that was, it just burn you up. So it was
Who turned on the gas, police or the owner of the McDonald's?
I guess the owner, because it was they shooting it, yeah. And when they came through the back, and sprayed and then locked down, and we was in there. So that's how that came about. But fortunate for us, I had heard about that, and we had a little water that calmed people down a little bit.
One of the key themes in a lot of these kinds of moments was the tensions that are inevitable, that just couldn't be avoided in those moments of the black community. So, for example, we've talked about Chancellor Davis, his pressures. He's trying to, well, I guess he has his set of motives.
Yeah.
typically understood to be the legislature was in session. He
Right.
wanted to make sure that the money
Mm-hmm.
wasn't
Right.
cut back sharply
Mhm.
for the college.
Mm-hmm.
Black clergy, the traditional NAACP elites,
Mm-hmm.
the black business community, to the
Mhm.
extent that people have different interests and motives. And can you talk about sort of how?
The black community came down on us very hard. There were two black business people that supported us. The entire black neighborhood wanted us run out of town. The Mr. Brown was the funeral home guy. He was the only one. And the white population got very upset with him because he was wealthy. And he said to us, this thing I get out of hand, but I'm going to just say this part right here. If y'all end up in jail, don't worry about it. I'll bond everybody out of jail. And that's all he said to us. That was Mr. Brown, the funeral home man. And his son, he was an older guy, and his son was about to take over. And he said, Dad, you sure you want to do this? His dad said to him, son, if you don't want to do it, get out. I'm going to do it. Then his son came back and said, I'll handle it for your dad. The other person was Dr. There was one, he was a dentist, very, very well-known dentist. And of the medical community, he was the only one. And he came that evening after it was over with, and he asked, was anybody hurt? If anybody get hit in the mouth, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it at no cost. So those two were the only two business people. Now, when we went down, when you would go towards McDonald's, there was a couple of business there. There was a little club there and something else. Now, those folks told us not to walk on that side. We had to go on the other side. There was no sidewalk over there. And so these are black businesses. No, get off the side. So that. Now, one thing that came to our rescue, I think, seal the deal, is there's this guy named Reverend Allen. He was the pastor of a large Methodist church. And I think Reverend Allen may have been from New York or somewhere, about, you know, how the Methodist church transferred him. And we didn't know who he was. There come this guy with this blue suit. And we was getting ready to go to, I think we were fixing to go to Holiday Inn maybe, because that's where we got arrested, the first arrest. And this guy shows up, fair-skinned guy, nice blue suit. And we were standing at this Holiday Inn. And this guy walks up and says, you know, these are students here to get an education. Their parents has worked hard and gave them money to come up here to go to school. They got money to come into your place and pay for their meal. And we were all sitting there. We had no idea who this guy was. And so, and this manager, whatever, he came out and said, who are you? That's when he said, I'm Reverend Allen, the pastor of whatever this church. He said, yes, sir. Does a United Methodist Church know you involved with this? He said, I ain't involved with nothing. I think these are our future. You need to get off the premises. Don't you go into jail. He said, if standing on the premises, just standing here and having a conversation, just take me with you. But I got the impression, we all got excited, but it looked like it was something about him being a Methodist kind of calmed those folks away. And then that's when he turned around and said, "Do y'all have meeting get together?" And Bill Anson Grant said, "Yeah." He said, "My church door is open, day or night." And he said, "Well, thank you." And so we left there and went to a church and kind of talked about what may happen. This might be a going to jail thing because this guy had police standing back as if they was going to arrest us. So we went over to his church, but we came the next day. And the next day we came, that's when them kids from towns, the thugs want to be thugs. And they showed up. It was about 6, 7 of them. Whoa. So now I walked on and talked to them and said, "Now you know this is nonviolent. Yep, we go on with you." And then that was this really, this guy had this real dark-skinned guy. All these guys had nicknames. One guy was Popo, Pop Mouth, Hot Dogs, all these nicknames. It took me a long time to try to figure out the real name. And he was supposed to be the real bad thugs. He would fight in a minute. He said, "No," told Bill Anson and Mr. Greenwich and all them, said, "No, we're going down with you on this one." He said, "When it's all over with and things done cool off, we'll get our punches in there." I said, "What you?" Be. He said, "Oh yeah, we know how to get back. You know, it might be 6 months later. Well, we know how to get back." I said, "Well, look here, don't break none of that while we're." He said, "Oh no, we going down with you. It ain't gonna be no fight, no talk back. We going with you." And so they did that, and that was the first arrest. Yeah, so.
Some of the
I'm going to pause it
okay,
right there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're back on. I just didn't want the file to get too big.
Okay.
Some of the things happen pretty close in time that are both very significant. One is the first ever, very modest, but the first ever successful integrations at a restaurant table in Pine Bluff, March.
Mm-hmm.
But also pretty quickly, that's when the arrests are going to start.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a lot of people in jail by the end of March
Mm-hmm.
because the police departments switch tactics.
Right.
And as you were just saying, you know, you get to a point where you think, we might now be heading towards arrests.
Mm-hmm.
When that moment arrived, I wonder how you made your calculation because of what the implications of jails in those places in those
Mm-hmm.
times and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I think that was a real fear moment. That because we had the beating and all that, but all that was outside. I think when we talked about the hotel going to take us down, I think the college people in the crowd was real nervous. But them young guys, they had been to jail. And they were kind of like an asset. Said, "Oh man, it ain't no big thing. It's just gonna be crowded and nasty up in there." And I said, "So what y'all do?" "Oh, we've been in there before." So what? And people started engaging a little bit. But I think that kind of calmed people's nerve a little bit. Just those younger guys had been there. And then when Mr. Coleman came by, and he didn't go to jail, but he was standing across the street. And I think when people looked around and saw the faces, even though they were a long distance away, kind of made you feel a little better. So we kind of got a little support. But what going to jail did was amazing to me. That is when that jail thing is when the old black people came out. And we was in jail, and they had a meeting at Reverend Allen Church. There wasn't no college student, and nothing like that. But I was told that church was packed. And they was talking about having a bond that's out and all that. And Mr. Brown was there, he said, no, I'll go with. And they tell me, said, them little old ladies had little rolls of money in the bra, and some had it in the shoes, bringing that little money to bail us out. And I think when that church group, that old population, I think that shook the whole city, because after that we saw a lot more yelling and cursing, and then white people start throwing objects, but they weren't that close to us. They would be, you niggas, were throwing at us. That was a big change, because at first they was in there knocking you down. And so we was, I think that's gonna have some impact here. And because the old people didn't come out and march with us, but they would come to that church. And then they started they started doing things like going to the jailhouse, asking people in the jailhouse, can we bring the kids some food? And at first they said no. And I don't know who changed that, but I know Reverend Allen and some members, and when they brought the food down there, they let us out in this big old, that park where when they lock you up, and they're holding that big old holding cell before they send you to the way in the back where you know, little tight bars. So those people they actually let us eat. They had all these big old fat chiefs standing there like they gonna kill somebody, but they let them bring their food in, and I think that calmed people, because from that point on, every time we would go back, we would see a few more people coming and stuff like that. And then the one thing happened, a little scary, is on campus, somebody had said that if we don't stop demonstrating, the football team, the sports team, we're going to lose. They're going to take all that money. I think that was a scare tactic. But man, when we were bonded out of jail, there was a lot of girls and things from Pine Bluff were coming to see her. Man, them big old football players came down there just shoving folks out of the way and threatening to bust our skull, and that was scary. Because I think some of them guys did take that serious. Yeah, y'all go back, and if I lose my scholar, I'm going to kill you myself. So that
it wasn't just no sports, it was no scholarship for sports.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was kind of scary. Yeah, that was pretty scary there. How'd your case ever get? What was the resolution of your legal case in a narrow legal sense? Well, the attorney for us was, what's that guy's name? Right there in Pine Bluff. No, Wilder Brandon took the big stuff, everything. Yeah. It was a young, real small black guy, had a law firm, and everybody said no, he's not gonna participate. He really got a good law, but I think way later, I think maybe Bill Clinton or somebody appointed him to be a federal judge. Little bitty guy, and he walked into the church. That was a Sunday afternoon church. We'd all gotten out, and it's just tons of people came. Oh, we just love you. Yeah, right. And he came in there, and he just walked in and told Reverend Allen, I'll handle the case, and just left, just like that. And I'm not sure what happened to that case, because I don't remember going to court. I don't know if it was thrown out or what, because the big stuff that my man was handling, he was the whole discrimination, civil rights, and he had a big case, yeah. And he was appealing his to the federal level. So it kind of started calming down, and so we went to Woolworth again. And what they had done is, I guess they had told all the white people don't come in at a certain time. So we went at 8. And we went back to the hotel. And the guy told us it was full. And they didn't tell me, but I was told later that they told some people that to keep my doors open, and to keep me off the lawsuit, and to keep white people, because if the white people get mad, they're going to destroy my hotel and all that kind of stuff. He said, could you tell your people come down here after dark at night? So I don't know if that happened, but I know during that time we did go down to the Holiday Inn, and we had a little thing, and they let us use the room. I never went that. I didn't go that to just spend the night.
Mm-hmm.
So it settled a little bit. Yeah.
Did you ever? I want to make a transition of a sort towards towards what will be your decision to take a formal role with SNCC, and ultimately head into the Delta. And also, before that, did you ever circle back around? Did you ever have any kind of closing conversation or meet again in some later sense with Chancellor Davis?
No, we were banned. We couldn't even, we couldn't even go on campus or nothing. Now,
years later, not.
No.
Never.
Now that there were that first wave of suspension. Now there were 3 or 4 kids who were suspended and stayed with us a while. Now they went back to school a year later.
Apology, I think. That was his condition.
But I never did go back. My wife was suspended. She didn't go back.
When were you married?
I got married May 16, 1964.
Okay.
Yeah. She wasn't in the arrest group, but she was with us when we went to the very first one, Woolworth, and she and we went. Where else did we go? Because we was arrested at the hotel because she didn't get arrested. But she was in the group of that first group. My wife was, and a homegirl of hers. But no, she never did go back. Joanne never went back. It was about 7 or 8 stayed the course. Yeah.
Let me ask you about something that's going to become very, very important in the SNCC Arkansas story in a space of a few years. But in this early phase, spring of '63, moving forward a little ways, you mentioned that you meet the woman who will become your wife. Bill Hanson will meet a woman who will become his wife
Ruth.
out of all of this context, Ruth. And so 2 things I'm interested in. One is what it's like to be with other people in such relatively intense circumstances, and reflect about what that.
Pause for a second. You're on the road again.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, I want to ask about a couple things, thinking about being together with other people doing this intense work. One is your reflections and perspective on being with people in such intense circumstances, the relationships, the human dynamics of that kind of experience, and also the interracial aspect of that in your specific circumstances there in Pine Bluff and then in SNCC, Arkansas, because of what will come to
the involvement, the interracial involvement made everything more difficult on the white side and the black side. On the black side, there was a lot of growing resentment toward whites being involved because they were being perceived as the lead part, not black folks themselves. Though that was not the case, but that's what they saw, and they saw a lot of that through Bill Henson. When we would go to the meetings, like we have meetings, mass meetings, and trying to recruit people in the neighborhood or trying to get something started, we specifically made an effort for me to lunch it, because when the whites would try and launch it, it would just kind of die dead, no response, and it always would be a thing where the black folk want to hear my answers of that. So that really stalled meetings and efforts to strategize real bad. On the racial side, I think there was a hard core resentment in the case of Bill and Ruthie. An interracial marriage right there in Little Rock, right there in Arkansas, that was just a no-no. And I think when things were getting a little quiet sometime, when whites would see that, it would flare back up. That's what it's all about, It's so that was and then that's really what generated the thinking, is that we got to officially make Jim Jones the head of this, to get rid of that, because that's just too much. Because when we would go to protest, it was so much focus on the whites that you really couldn't get kind of through to talk about what we're trying to do. Because their attitude was, what's with the white boys? They don't need to go. There ain't no problem with them going to a Holiday Inn and stay. They just here to make trouble. That's how they perceived it. So that made it more difficult. And when I took charge of it, I told Bill, you stay at the office and coordinate some stuff. Let us run this thing. And that made it, the crowd was a lot more comfortable. And I think we were growing in numbers when that move was made as well.
When you needed to shift into these more prominent, consistently prominent roles, because obviously there are plenty of prominent roles all the way along, but and the project director title shifted to you, 64. How did Hanson, and were there implications for your relationship, your working relationship, your personal relationship? How'd that go on?
No, that stayed pretty good, but Hanson was a very aggressive person, and I had to really shut him down a lot of time in situation. I said, now, there are some places we need to target, like the voter registration stuff, and I made a specific point. Forest City, Helena, West Helena, Mariana, those are hardcore conservative hate area, because all that part of Arkansas is where all them big plantation was. And I said, and we got to be careful, because I think there are some of them, as we call them good old boys, see me and you, I think the shot gonna be fired at you. And he didn't want to do none of that, but me and Greenwich and all of us said, no, I'm going. There comes a time when we planted the seed and got things going, and we got a little group together, that's okay. But for you to come out, in a lead capacity over there, that's too dangerous. You're endangering too many people. And he was very, he didn't want to do that because though he didn't say it, never would admit it, he liked that lamplight. He liked it. He liked it, but he swear that, yes, you do. You love reading your name. You love getting hit in the head. And then run to a camera and show the blood on you. That ain't what it's about. And I knew when we went to those places, they were going to respond to the color of my skin, because it was all of the whites who they knew in those neighborhoods were folk they didn't like. We don't need you to add to it. And when we when I got the first place I went was Forest City. Now that Forest City surprisingly responded kind of quickly, and I think it had to do with Miss Clay. She owned a funeral home, and she had a big old house, and she said, y'all come and take that house, you can stay there. And then she had a sister, a cousin who was a principal, and I think she had the professional folks around her. And when we went to her house, and she called them all over there, and we told them, I said, no, we ain't trying to integrate something here in Forest City, but it's such a huge base. That part of Arkansas is 90% black, and the voting over here is zero. And so I think that issue was a little easier than cracking the restaurants and going to the jail. But no, there were some issues there, and I think the issue had to do with Bill didn't want to relinquish his role, but we kind of got through it. But that was, we had to get tough with him. Now stay here. We had to do it that way. Yeah.
I want to ask more about the voting work and registration work and other parts of the program in the Delta. But let me first ask, how did you go to Atlanta occasionally? Did folks come from Atlanta, from SNCC, to how the relationship with the national folks work out?
Most of us was I would take trips down there, and they would have those we call coordinating meeting, and that's where all the different states that was involved had all these SNCC people. We would come there and we would exchange thoughts and ideas. What are you doing here? How did you overcome that? And a lot of that. So I got a good feel for it. But one of the things that I felt differently about was I thought I had a better feel for people in Arkansas, and because I had a farm background. A lot of the folks back in those days somewhere were farm connected. And when I got to Atlanta and would go down there, all them boys were big city boys, and they would just be sitting up articulating and in order to say we're going to go down the road to a store. It'd take them 3 hours to get, because they had these educated kids, and they was articulating what they know and all the big words. I'd just be sitting there and say, what are y'all doing? It was, I saw a lot of showing off their education and not a good feel for the neighborhood. That never was part of it. And when they would ask me to make comments, well, I would talk very specific about the level of folks I was dealing with and what the issue is that, and I don't think that's going to happen until blah, 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 blah. And so old Jim Foreman told me one time, he said, Joan, what you are doing is a real direct connection to the community. But that's a wonderful thing. And he asked me, he said, do you want us to send some people? I said, well, not really, but I tell you what I would like to do. You got a group down there, that's a great singing group. Send that group up here and to one of those meetings I have, because I have a lot of people, and they church folks, they'll love that. And I said, and let's slowly graduate. But those guys, you know, when they came and saw that big crowd, all they wanted to do was sing and have a good time and went on back. But what I was doing was asking people put your shoes on and let's go knock on some doors and try to get people to vote. And then I said also, I told Miss Clay, we need a couple of folks to run for something, but they need to be educated, they need to be highly respected. And then she told me that this guy they had a little plant in Forest City. I think it may have been a garment factory. He said, well, that guy over there, he'd been promoted to manager. I said, let's run him. And we did. But it wasn't like the mayor, but it was a position, and he won. And folks said, I never thought it was going to happen. I said, well, you do have to make an effort to make it happen. And he went on and did real well. And I said, and that's kind of stuff we need to do, as well as, you know, we don't have to go into a white restaurant to eat. So if somebody do want to do that, you know, they can, you know. So that's the direction I went.
The SNCC program seemed to have those three big thrusts: public accommodations, where you could do that, then the whole voter registration, and starting to run people in electoral campaigns, and education too. You were talking about the schools question too. I've read that I've seen the numbers for what the SNCC program accomplished in short order. I mean, in pretty darn short order.
Oh yeah,
24 months, less than that. And what number you're looking at? More people signing up, despite the poll tax still persisting. A lot of candidates get into races. Right, exactly. There's the 66 governor's race outcome, which is a curious thing because of the black vote. And
We're rolling.
okay, we're back on after a short break for equipment. Ms. Jones, we were starting to talk about the program, the SNCC program, the work out there, and the voting work, getting people into races. And let me just turn over to you.
Now, in some cases, folks fell short in vision, because there were individuals who public accommodation was all they had in their head. And, you know, once you integrate or desegregate, and all the restaurants has opened their doors, and you can go in the town and get your room, to me that's finished. But we had some folks who, you know, look long distance. Well, let's go to Chicago and protest. That's an example because that was the only spoken they had, and those are the folks. Well, in Arkansas, I said no, you know, no, that we need to. This population need to, you know, access voting and start running candidates, you know, and that was a new piece to it. But some folk were stuck. I mean, they were stuck and couldn't get off that. Yeah.
Describe your experience across a representative week doing voter registration work in the Delta, fall of 63, early 64. What happens to you in that week, and who do you see, and what's it like, and how does it feel?
When my approach to it is, in every community, almost every community, there is that woman, and in most cases it was women. And I learned that from that lady name was Dearworth and Goo, Miss Dearworth. And she said, young man, when you go into a neighborhood, for the first time, if there's a black barber shop there, go in there. I said, okay. And you ask for Pacific type people. I'm looking for somebody that's interested in politics, know some good people that could run for office, or they have a lot of influence. She said, those gossiping men in them barbershop know that stuff. So when I went to Forest City, I took that advice, and I pulled up, and there was about 4 or 5 guys out there. I think these are working people on a break. And I said, introduced myself, and I didn't say I was Snick. I said, I'm part of a program, and we're trying to encourage black folks to vote more, and even better than that, we would like to see more black folks run for office. And when I said that, the first thing came, like all 3 of them said the same thing. You need to go talk to Mrs. Clay. I said, now who is Mrs. Clay? She owns a funeral home. The husband died, but she made an even bigger funeral home. That's who you need to talk to. And so I have my little Volkswagen. I said, well, how do I get there? Well, come on, follow me. They went on. I mean, they like actually introduced me to her. And she was ready to go. She said, young man, I'm just glad to see you. It's long overdue. She was all excited. And she said, I told my sister, I said, what's your sister? She said, she's a principal over there. And just the 2 of us talk all the time. She got on that phone and dialed up. And she said, how you want to do that? I said, first of all, I need a place to stay. I probably need to stay 2 or 3 days. She said, see that house right there? See that house right there? See that house right there? I said, yeah, all of my house. Which one you want? I said, I just need someone to sleep. And man, she was there fixing people up, and her sister came over, and she said, told me about this preacher. He said he's a very aggressive preacher, but he's by himself. Went over there, and I said, well, we need to have a meeting. And those 2 women said, we'll do the calling. You just go on that. I don't know who all they called, but they had a church packed that night. And then that's when this guy's name came up. He was there. He said, you know everybody, and all the working folks here, if all of them just vote for him, he got to win. And that's how they got started. So that seed was there, but it was just sitting still, you know. And then that's when I started. I said, I made a point to go back there later on. I said, I followed your advice. She said, in every community, there was that type person. And then when I went to other places, you know, I was looking for that type. And I got to West Helena, that little lady over there, I can't think of these names anymore. She had a store, run a little store. And I walked up to her and introduced myself, and I said that what I was doing, and I'm trying to encourage people to vote, and we are running for candidate. She said, I ran 2 years ago, but I didn't have no vote because the folks. She said, I love to work with you, and she said, park your car. We took off. So I don't know if she said, well, I'm getting kind of old now. But my son just finished college down at Pine Bluff, and I'm going to talk to him about running. But she was able to rally those type meetings. And a few years later, after I'd gone, I learned there's a lot more elected folks started, you know, that caught on and took off. And I said, well, by then, when I went back through there and learned some things, and I met what's this guy? He's an attorney in Little Rock. What's his name? I chatted with him, and he said, yeah, some good things have been going down. He worked with they had a health clinic in Mariana, and Bill Clinton appointed him, I understand, as a federal judge. What's that guy's name? Oh, shoot. It'll come to me. And he said, there's a lot of good things that's gone on in East Arkansas. And then that's where I stayed in that circle until I left, because I didn't want to just be accommodation, because I thought we had gotten past that a little bit.
Accommodations,
yeah.
Before we turn to some of the reasons that you departed in '65, moved to Atlanta, what was your mood? What was your sense of relative gains, challenges not met? How were you feeling about your work out there in those from fall '63 onward?
Well, I felt good because I have a personality of incredible tolerance, and when I go out to do things and folks don't participate or we don't get it done, I don't get disgusted. I don't get mad. I just say to myself, well, we can't win them all. And I've always been that type of person. But I also learn is my personality has helped me a lot. I don't get mad with folks. I don't pick and choose, and I can take it. You dog me, talk about me, it doesn't bother me at all. And so I don't see it as a failure. Sometimes I said, I wish we could have done or could have gotten a bigger role of folks participated, but it doesn't bother me that it didn't. And I'm very realistic about things. I have never put my eyes on, when I look at doing things, I work at it hard and very diligent. But if 15 people step up and really work at getting it done, some folks, it's just like in church. Some folks, you can get a lot done, but some folks think if you can't get 75 people to help you, it's a failure. I said, no, 75 people will be a problem for you. So let's get a small group that's got high energy and ready to go. And that's where I've always worked. And I think because could recruit people and identify, folks took off and did a lot of things. I remember I was in Georgia, and I went to a little, what was that town called? And I went down to this little town, and this was
Yeah.
yeah.
Were you working with the sharecroppers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I went to this town, and there was a little town where they had a little factory, and they left town, and everybody unemployed. And so when I got there, I said, well, I went and met with this school teacher. She's a very prominent woman in their neighborhood. And I said, well, I'd like to have a little meeting. She said, I can get the people to come out. And when they all came out to the meeting, it was a big meeting. There was this big warehouse sitting there. Wow, this big warehouse, and it was shut down. So I said, well, what any thoughts about what you would like to do? Everybody in this building had these big thoughts of like building a 75 storage, high-rise buildings, all kind of wild stuff. And I said, can I make a comment on something I see with my eyes? They said, yes, go ahead. I said, if a plant comes here and y'all get a chance to go to work. I said, I see so many babies, so many kids. I don't think nobody in this room could go to work. And so they all started laughing. They said, Mr. Joe, you're right. You got to, for you to go to work, you got to have someone to leave. You got 5 or 6 kids. I said, one thing I would suggest is y'all need to consider a nursery to keep kids. I mean, that town was saturated with little kids. I think everybody had 5 kids, 6, 10. And this lady said, my brother, in that big warehouse, that was her brother's warehouse. She said, my brother got a big warehouse. But she said, he is such a hustler. He ain't gonna let you have that. I said, what kind of hustler? She said, he's a big time gambler. And he loved money. He ain't gonna do nothing. So I said, I'd like to meet him. She said, I'd call him. So he came to the meeting, 55-year-old kind of guy, maybe 60. I said, sir, in order for this town to even think about going to work, because there was other works in the little town, but they couldn't go to work, nobody to take care of it. I said, if we could build a nursing home here for these kids to be taken care of, I think most of these women here could find work. He said, you think so? I said, I think so. Because see, I'd already talked to this big army Robert some place. It's a big military. They were hiring a lot of people, and it was common labor. Mm-hmm. So I said, and that's your warehouse? He said, yeah. He said, I said, that big warehouse could be turned into, I said, what you gonna do with it? He said, I own it, I don't do nothing with it. I said, we could turn that big warehouse into one heck of a nursery, and these folk would have a place to keep these kids, and they could go to work. He said, well, Mr. Jones, if you could get it renewed, and it need a lot of work on it, I'll give it to the group. I'll give it to the group. That's what he said. I said, ladies, we got work to do. They said, what we got to do? I said, me and all of y'all going over there, we're going to tear that whole house out, tear all that wall down, and we're going to put all that board out there on the street, and we're going to call it the city, tell them come pick it up. And I said, y'all ready to do that? You going to make us do that? Yes, ma'am. All of you, every woman in town. They showed up. And the thing that was so beautiful about this, there's a big lumber company in this next town, and this guy had taken some lumber somewhere, and he came by, and all these women, bow, bow. And that guy, he said, come here, sir. You the only man I see. What, are you in charge of this? I said, yes, sir. I told the women, we want to tear down this place, rip it on the inside. We're going to turn it into a nursery, so all these women with all these babies can go to work. That guy said, down there at the, he said down there at the what, some robber, but it's a big Navy, yeah. Navy base or something like that. He said, man, they would love to have these women coming in because they way short. He said, you got any money to pay? I said, no. It's just sweat and blood. He said, let me go talk to my boss. Warner Roberts. That's the name of the play. Yeah, that's the name of the play. This guy went down there, and it was about 5:30 came back. He said, you know what? I got some good news. He said, if them women got to do all that building, he told them, said, all that lumber out there, he says, been a little rain on, but it's still good. You take it up there. Man, them women built that thing, and the guy who owned it, he came up there, he said, man, are you God sent? Or you ain't Jesus Christ, are you? Man, how'd you get the women to do all that work? I said, they doing it for themselves. And we got this huge, man, that thing was about 2 blocks, 3 blocks in size. And so this one lady said, can't you get federal money? I said, let me tell you about that. No, you don't want that. If we get federal money for this, the federal government make you put square feet per child. You won't get 1/3 of them kids in that building. But if you private like you are, you own it, you can stack them in like sardines. And all of y'all that's not working, don't get a job, you come down here and y'all become the group that take care of all these babies. And all of y'all that get a job, y'all start giving them a few dollars for taking care of these kids. Just like that, man, that thing just took off. Just took off. And long after I left, I would get little cards from folks saying it went so well, and we would love to see you come back and visit. But that's been years ago.
Wow.
You know, and it's always just, you know, I just kind of been a little gifted on that side, just seeing things and just and believe that folks can do it pretty good themselves, you know. So.
Let's talk a little bit as we kind of move towards our last section of the interview. To talk about some of the reasons, some of the things that were happening in SNCC nationally, how they reverberated in Arkansas, some of the things happened in Arkansas, and then how you made your transition over. We talked earlier about in '64, the directorship passes formally into your hands. You talked about Bill Hansen. There were other whites that had come in and were coming in that time. So I think the SNCC staff, 64, 65-ish in Arkansas, would have been about 8 people full time, sort of full staffers, and 4 black, 4 white. The tensions are becoming a little more closely felt on the racial leadership of the organization question. 65 is a pretty hot summer nationally for riots and all. The whole question of the integrationist model is now being challenged by lots of folks. Things aren't, especially, you know, we've talked about the economic difficulties of moving on the economic front. It's just getting, you know, like you said earlier, some people's vision went to public accommodations. After you desegregate, what then? How do you finally get to the economic justice issues and all this stuff? So with all that as kind of prelude, I'm interested in your perspective on, through that 64, 65 period, how those questions played out inside your life in SNCC in Arkansas, and how the circumstances that led to your move away.
Well, yeah, my moving away was what I saw and what I felt was the resources and the use of people was dwindling, and a lot of the folks who had that energy early was beginning to drift toward going to work to make a living. People were getting older. The SNCC group was young and high energy and educated, and this whole movement was a fun thing. And a lot of folks was not recognizing we're getting older, we're becoming family folks, resources are dwindling, and that was a natural thing to me. But a lot of the white kids who've come down wanted that to be a lifetime situation but what we were dealing with was not lifetime. A lot of the kids that we had worked with and we saw do wonderful things in SNCC and all of that, they too had hit college level and gone on. And when me and my wife, and I said this to Bill Hanson, all of them, but look, guys, this we have done a pretty good job, and we are going to run it if we keep stretching it, and we ain't doing nothing. There's no means of income, and that's when folks start peeling off, because I think the Black Panthers and the Stokely and all that, they saw that movement drilling too, and they were trying to rebuild them some little new things and get it going, since this is kind of ended. And then I think SNCC sort of went as far as its capabilities. And we had to recognize that we got older and needed jobs to support families, and we had seen black elected officials come in, and I thought that was very successful. But there were a lot of folks, and there's still people who think we still should be doing that. No, it's not the same. That it's changed. People change. Now, yeah, there are conditions all around, but it does not fit. I don't think it fit a SNCC type of activity that we were doing. I think we did pretty good fueling folks' growth, but I don't think we could be a lifetime instrument for that. Yeah.
You were in Atlanta, but and busy, I'm sure, traveling quite a bit for Sheriff Harper's Fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
But '66 in the spring, obviously, John Lewis is ousted at SNCC, and so Carmichael comes in. And one last thing I want to ask about kind of or maybe two things, left behind or things that will happen in Arkansas while you're now on the East Coast. One is Greenwich feels compelled to basically make a statement challenging the abandonment of the integrationist model. And Stokely Carmichael actually comes to Arkansas and has things to say about Greenwich, in fact. So I'm interested in if you had at the time, you were a long ways away. I don't know if you kind of watched that at that time or not. That's one thing. The other thing is the emergence in Arkansas, in Little Rock anyway, of Bobby Brown and the Black Youth United, and that you bumped up against that at all? Knew those folks?
I didn't, bump into it, but I heard about it and knew what was taking place. I think the way I perceived that was going to be a very small faction, and it was going to be very satisfying to Brown, and it was going to be very satisfying to Stokely. But I don't think they were focusing on anything that was going to be helpful to people. They were on their one-way trip, and they were egoing on it. And both of those guys always, way back in the early days of SNCC, wanted to be the top gun, but they didn't have an audience. And that's what that is, and that's nothing else. I remember a long time ago, Stokely was trying to carve out him a group because he wanted to be the next Malcolm X. And that's all that was. He wasn't focused on benefits of trying to make situation better and different. He just wanted that, that star in his hat. And I never was interested in that. I think you have to sort of try to make a difference the best you can, but to go out there on your own and carve you out a little spot. I think to me, that's a waste of time. And it's not going anywhere, you know. It gets you a lot of media and all that kind of stuff, but it's nothing. It's nothing else, I don't think. No, I was in tune and knew about all that, but none of that was anything when I was with the sharecroppers, one of the things that I had to deal with is that was small farmer stuff. You always had guys who wanted to go attack the white man, attack FHA, and take their money and just go find all the black farmers and just throw all the money out there to them. I said, well, guys, that's wasteful thinking.
Excuse us, I'm sorry.
If they don't do it, you know, some of that's too unreal.
John, should we jump back on here?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, all righty.
We're on now.
Okay. Let me ask you about a couple things here as we wind down. You want to tell an important story about the tensions inside, say, your work at sharecroppers, between people have different ideas about how to go at these problems.
Mm-hmm. With the sharecroppers, there are folks who feel they deserve being paid a lot of money. No identification of what for, but just to do it. What my assignment was as sharecroppers was to go identify in Virginia, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, small farmers. And I did not deal with the inside of their mechanism. I told them I think there are some opportunities for them to sell their product and make some money. That's the end I worked on. And I worked with national chain stores and the big chain stores. And I learned in that circle, most of the stores was looking for black farmers, small farmers, product. Closer, fresher, lot cheaper because of the distance. And that worked fine. That was kind of easy. But what had some of them blocked is they were talking about the money the big farmers were making, which was not always true, and shipping it all over the country, and you need a lot of volume. And they weren't looking over the fact that I got 5 acres of tomatoes that I can harvest 4 times, and I can send it right here to Kroger's, and Kroger will buy it, which is an excellent marketing strategy. They were looking past that, and that's the kind of stuff I work with, and they done well. Now, some of them ended, but that was because the older population who was farming, children didn't want to farm and headed to New York. Well, this time it closed that project down, and some folk don't recognize that, and you have to be straight with them. So no, you have nobody to run the farm anymore. Don't sell your property. Please don't sell it, because in 5 or 10 years, right here is probably going to be the home of condos. So you make plenty of money selling it. So that's the side I've worked on, trying to get them to make money. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that, talking about yourself and how you could go through this experience. You said you're a realist. You have a kind of a measured sense of outcomes. And being a realist, did you ever have reason to think that, looked at in some ways, the progress is much slower than we all would like on some of the basic economic questions, that maybe there's another way to do this, maybe with institutional racism, those kinds of built-in headways, that maybe the integrationist model we had in mind isn't quite the right model. Anyway, just any second?
No, I my thinking was in the mall. I never did see it like a lot of the guys did. That the integration thing was the mall to go with. What I did see though is a lot of the white kids who came in and played roles. I would look very closely at. Some of them did have very, very good contacts, parents in big circle, wealthy, and what I zeroed in on. Give us some contacts in the Northeast, Ohio, where we can possibly do some things, because some of the folks in the movement saw when the whites came in, they thought they saw money, and money to be brought and put in the pot. I didn't. I always saw them as potential great contacts to make better outlets. For an example, I in Arkansas, one of the different kids, I said, look, we got these kids pretty smart. Why don't you, like we had some kids from Boston and New York and DC, why don't we go to these kids that's pretty smart and looking to college? Do you, in your circle, have contact with schools that we might can get scholarship? That's how I use them. I never had this dream to heaven like a lot of people did, and I think my background helped me to stay grounded. You know, my parents did well in farming, but I saw the grind in it, and so we didn't have this big trillion dollar falling out of the sky. But I think that helped me ground. And I think some of the movement people didn't have that kind of grounded background, and a lot of that stuff was theory. You know, we should be able to do that. We should be able, and sometimes those theories were dependent on the government doing a whole lot of stuff, but the folks you were working with weren't ready for that level of stuff. So that's how and I think in terms of slow things, yeah, I saw slow development. I saw a lot of things didn't happen. I saw things like efforts to try and get more nurses and blacks in nursing, smaller hospitals in smaller towns, and trying to recruit doctors to come in those areas and spend time. That didn't happen. I was hoping that kind of stuff would have made huge dents, because you take East Arkansas, and you're looking at folk going all the way to Little Rock or to Memphis, to the big cities, and I looked at that, but that didn't fly. But when it didn't fly, it wasn't something that brought me down, you know. So.
Final thoughts? Any?
I guess my final thought is my being involved with SNCC was a wonderful thing. I saw a lot of growth in people. I saw a lot of growth in young folks who excelled and went on. I think some people see that because they did well and moved on was disappointment, as opposed to staying where they were. And all that, just that geographical change, and you can't blame people for that. I feel real good years later that I did pretty good with putting people together on the marketing end and small farmers. I think I feel good about when I left SNCC. I stayed in the rural kind of area, still working on the behalf of people. And if you look at my resume, every job I've had put me in touch with working with a lot of people, and that's been the joy of my life. Just loved it. Don't. Probably could have been several other things. I wish the 50,000 black farmers we had identified in the east and the south and the far south could have been given some payment toward the government not allowing them to borrow money and all of that. But a lot of those folks, when a decision was made to recognize them, 95% of those folks was dead and gone. And that level is who should have been the beneficiary. And now the sons and the daughters of those folks are in Chicago and Detroit and everywhere else. And if there is a little bit of a comment about compensation given, it needs to be very carefully done. I would not be real excited about John Doe in Chicago now is 37 years old and does not even know who his granddaddy was that farmed 75 years ago. I don't think that compensate who did the hard work. And but I've been very pleased with the direction I went in life. I've pretty much been close to agriculture, small town.